Thanks, Mark, and thank you all for coming to this. It's sort of a little tuba, I hope. So yeah, Mark introduced me, and I'll introduce myself in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. But this talk is about self-care and mental health, and I will go into sort of the specifics about that again when I introduce myself. But I always like to start with this little GIF or meme or whatever you call it. Oh, did I go back? So there is this idea about grind culture and working hard to work hard. And oftentimes that's something that is pushed in the music world. And I like this because I really like dogs, and I just got a dog. And a big motivating factor for me sometimes is, what am I practicing for and why am I practicing? And sometimes we practice, of course, for a performance, or we practice for a recital or what have you. But having an end goal in mind that is not attached to an actual goal, that we are seeking to have something for another living thing, always motivates me. And I want to give my dog a really nice backyard one day. So that's what puts me in the practice room nowadays. And I hope that you can also have a backyard for your dog in your practice. So a little bit about me. As you heard, I am primarily a tuba player and tuba teacher. I teach at Vanderbilt University. Right now, I play in the Ann Arbor Symphony and Santa Fe Opera. And I, of course, love playing the tuba, but I love to do also many other things. I design websites. Some of you may know this guy. He teaches at the University of Michigan. And I, during the pandemic, took a coding boot camp and just got really into designing websites. And for me, it's a great use of my creative skills and also my interpersonal abilities. And as you can probably tell by now, I get bored when I just do one thing. So doing multiple things really sort of fills up my cup. I'm a runner. I ran the Chicago Marathon this year. That was my third marathon, and a couple half marathons before that. I take pictures and travel. I am a yoga teacher. This is me doing a handstand in Switzerland. So the combination of two of those things. And as Mark also said, I work for a great organization called Crisis Text Line. And Crisis Text Line is a service that you or anyone you know can take advantage of if you are in crisis or in anxiety or having a panic attack and you need to talk to somebody. And this is a great intervention place where you can seek out any kind of help in the moment if you don't have someone who you can reach out to, or if you know someone who needs help, or if you have a friend who you don't know how to communicate with. It's a great line to speak with. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But the main part of this presentation is talking about how we can stay on top of things in our life so that everything seems a little bit more manageable. And this part of the presentation will perhaps seem not very revolutionary to some of you, but really what the revolution is when you actually implement these things. Because so many of us, I think, especially when we're in the grind and we're doing the thing, we forget to check in with ourselves and we start to lean into bad habits or not listen to our bodies, and we stay up really late watching Netflix or practice too long or practice mindlessly, and it doesn't actually do anything productive for us. So a big part of this is awareness. So I'll probably try to move through this first part fairly quickly. And then the second part is really 5 things that I've learned while working for Crisis Text Line that I use with people that I communicate with, to help them in the moment when they're experiencing anxiety. And this is helpful for, of course, anyone who experiences anxiety, or if you are a teacher who has students who experience anxiety, or if you have neighbors or friends or colleagues or anyone who's ever in this space. These are just tangible things that we can do that can help us in the moment. So for the first part, again, these kind of things that we can do during our day to make things more manageable. The first thing is just to make a list. I start every day with just making a list of the things that I need to do. And sometimes when I need a win, there are things like take a shower or brush my teeth. And there's little things, of course, that don't take a lot of effort, but sometimes just the idea And the act of marking something off of our list is in and of itself a win. And sometimes we need a win more than other times. Having a morning routine, something that we can show up for ourselves every day, is really helpful and impactful, especially just this idea of doing the same thing repetitively. A big part of my morning routine is, of course, doing something physical and doing something, you could say, spiritual or mentally fulfilling. So physical, I'll go for a walk with my dog, I'll run, do yoga or something. And then the spiritual side can be something like meditation, or even just sitting quietly and just trying to just be with your thoughts for a second. A lot of our day is just spent thinking about what we need to do next, or something that happened yesterday. And so little time is actually spent thinking about this slice of time that we are living in right now. So anything that you can do to just sort of be mindful of that current moment and that sort of spiritual side. Of course, the spirituality is a different discussion that is a broader topic. It doesn't have to be, for you can be praying or anything like that, but can be as simple as just sitting and being mindful of the present moment. With regards to music, because we are all musicians in here, or music enthusiasts, I think bringing this mindfulness is very important to our practice sessions. And what better way to do that than to take ownership of our practice sessions by recording everything we do. And this is a big thing that I try to hit home with my students, in that I'm a firm believer of the fact that when you are practicing and playing something, especially if it's not a whole note, if it's technical to any level, it's very difficult to actually do the thing at a very high level and listen to the thing at a very high level. So recording yourself and then making time to listen back to that is critical to improve. And not only critical to improve, but it will also be the thing probably that separates you from other people who do not do this. So I think there's, again, as I mentioned before, there isn't a whole lot of revolution to the things that I'm saying. Of course, I'm sure that you've had teachers and friends and colleagues who have been saying these things for years, but there are actually, in my opinion, very few people who integrate these things into their lives or their practice sessions or their teaching. So just take time to try to work these things into your life and your music making. Goal setting, obviously a big part of being mindful too. So the idea that we have different types of goals, I think, just orients us towards what we want most in our days, our weeks, and our lives. With regards to micro goals, I'm thinking, what can I do today? Sort of in that list idea. What are the things that I can get done with my energy that I have today while I am awake? The medium goals, sort of what can I work towards over a finite amount of time? For me right now, this is Duolingo. How many hours a day or how many minutes a day can I put towards learning German? So possibly the next time that I'm forced to know German, that I actually know German. I was just a bit of context about that. I recently had to play with a German orchestra with about 3 weeks notice, and all the rehearsals were in German, and you never know what opportunity is going to come to you. So it's best to be prepared for those things by goal setting. The next one is just this macro goal. So just having an idea of where you want to go. And I'm sure teachers do this with their students, teachers do this with themselves, but a big part of macro goal setting, I think, should be the idea that we should have goals that resonate with us. And if you are working towards, for example, getting a job because your teacher might tell you that you need to be working towards getting a job, I don't know if you'll actually work towards that with all of yourself every day. So a big part, again, of this macro goal setting is sitting down and saying, okay, well, what do I want long term? What do I want in 1 year? What do I want in 5 years? What do I want in 10 years? And again, just this mindfulness of where we see ourselves and where we want to see ourselves is critical. And as I mentioned with the list thing, this idea that we can look back on these goals and say, wow, I actually did a lot over the last month or year. And there have been a lot of times when, September, October rolls around, almost a whole calendar year, And I've looked back at my lists and I'm like, wow, I actually did a lot of that stuff. And having that list and that accountability for ourselves is critical to being able to move through things with any kind of optimism, at least in my opinion. This idea of taking advantage of resources is important. If you're a student, most likely your university has access to, or institutional access to, great resources that you won't have when you leave a school. So taking advantage of those things like Berlin Digital Concert Hall, music libraries, Naxos, what have you, this is very important to have access to because you won't have access to that forever. And, if you are working towards a professional playing goal, I had a big change in my practice sessions when I started to turn my phone on airplane mode. And this was something that somebody told me that I was like, oh yeah, well, whatever. I focus fine in my practice sessions. But the minute I started doing that, and the minute that I made practicing sort of my dojo and this mindful time that I spent actually physically thinking about getting better and mentally fully engaged, it was exhausting because it's a full mental and physical workout to actually practice your instrument. And that's when I started to see marked improvement and quick improvement on things that I was setting out to do on a short term. So very important to do that. And I think it's just worth it to do that. If you want to do this, I think you should put all of yourself into this. And a big part of this is trying to eliminate distractions because the phone is distracting, as I'm sure you all know. This is really, really big. This idea of being deliberate with the time that we are working and the time that we're not working. And specifically with the time that we are not working. I think so many of us, especially music students who are working towards these professional goals, grad schools, whatever, we wake up, we spend some time practicing, we're in classes all day, we're working, and then we spend a bunch of hours practicing at night. There's no boundaries there. I mean, you're literally working from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, and then we're expected to wake up the next day and have a full battery. That's not sustainable. And that's why I think this idea of burnout culture is becoming prevalent because so many of us are spending all of our on time on, and there is no time that's being allotted for being off. It's critical. So I recommend starting with a 9-to-5 system if you can. I mean, if you don't have any kind of, if you're a student and you have classes in those hours, that's fine. Those times can move around, but just having a little bit of time, even at the end of your day, that you can dedicate to just doing something that is designated for self-care. And this is, of course, the topic of this seminar. But if you're thinking about self-care, and if you're thinking about the things that actually nourish you and the things that charge your battery and the things that make you want to wake up the next day and get back in the practice room or get back in the classroom or get back in the workspace, that's probably a very personal thing, this idea of self-care. And what is self-care for me? As I mentioned earlier, yoga, running, playing with my dog. What's self-care for you? Probably very different. Maybe knitting or watching a movie or playing video games, and spending time being mindful about what we are actually using for self-care is critical, and not saying, there's this thing in yoga teaching, a lot of yoga teachers or people who do yoga are like, you should just do yoga. And it's like, well, yoga is not the key to everyone's problems. Yoga or physical activity might work for some people, but it certainly does not work for everyone. And this also, even smaller in regards to physical activity, if you're looking to get on any kind of physical activity train and you're not sort of resonating with running or Peloton or weightlifting, there's probably something out there that you actually enjoy and can commit to. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about any kind of self-care or physical activity. And then this idea of diversifying yourself, very, very important, and I try to push this home with my students all the time, in that there was a moment when I was in my master's where I was spending so much time practicing. I went to a party with a bunch of other grad students, and I had only been thinking about Ride of the Valkyries for like 3 days. And I couldn't talk about anything but Ride of the Valkyries. And I don't want you to be that person who's at a party who doesn't have anything else to talk about besides Ride of the Valkyries. So Think about things that you can do off of your instrument. Of course, I feel like I have several, and sometimes I want to do different things on different days, and that just gives me different things to talk about. Right now, I'm really into cocktail making, so if any of you want to talk about booze or making cocktails, please, I would love to talk about that. But this idea that spending 10 minutes on an activity every day to make us a more well-rounded and a person who can communicate easier and can communicate things that we like easier is just really important to being an interesting person. And people, I think, inherently want to be around interesting people. So think about that. Again, the second part of this presentation is just about this idea of how can we go from hot to cool. This is the idea that we try to hit home on the crisis text line. And that a hot moment is one where you are filled with so much anxiety and just thought about something that is bothering you that you can't think about anything else. And that is, in my opinion, a 10 out of 10 hot moment. So what can we do in the moment to go from that moment to a moment where we can actually handle the thing that we are being hot about? And a big part of this, well, actually, let me talk about crisis text line for a second, because I said I was going to. Crisis text line, there we go. Crisis text line is a service that you can text into at any time by texting 686-868 and be connected with someone rather who has been trained for 40 hours to talk to anyone who is in a state of anxiety or panic. I will be the first person to say that this is not a replacement for therapy, or it's not a replacement for any kind of long-term sustainable solution to mental health issues. But if you or someone you know is in a situation where you have nowhere else to turn and you need to talk to somebody, this is a great place to turn. It's, you could say that it's a last resort, but I think it's a great resource to have. Now, as a yoga teacher, mindfulness and meditation is a big part of how I stay mentally healthy. And one of the things that I try to say in this topic, and just whenever I'm talking about this with my students or my friends or family or colleagues, is that the people who are the happiest, I believe to be not a person or group of people with an absence of mental health issues, but they're the people who have the most tools to deal with these things. And I don't think anyone can actually say that they can run their whole life without at any point feeling any form of anxiety. I think anxiety shows up in different, ways for different people, but to be able to say that you don't worry about anything on some level, that is amazing. And I think you should be teaching this class if that's you. But this idea that we all need somewhere to go if we are feeling any kind of panic is very important. And mindfulness, meditation is a big part of this, and being able to ground ourselves in the present. This slice of time, whenever I say the word now, it's one word, it's very quick. But so many of us, like I mentioned before, spend so much of our day thinking about something that happened yesterday that stressed us out, or something that's coming up that's stressing us out. And this moment, because it's so small, is inherently not stressful. What is in this moment? Nothing. It's already in the past. So anything you can do to ground yourself in the moment. Breathing is a big part of this. But the best advice that I ever got about meditation came from a very well-known tuba player by the name of Warren Deck. And Warren Deck is a god of tuba playing and tuba teaching, but he's also a mindfulness guru. He gave me a great metaphor one day when we were in the middle of a lesson. And he said, meditation for me is not about sitting in a room with the lights off, candles, and yoga clothes. It's just about this idea where you can think about being next to a river, for example, and there being a leaf sort of pass you by. You pick up the leaf, you examine it, you sort of look at its color and texture, and then you put it back into the river and you let it float away. And that is how we should interact with our thoughts while we are meditating. There is this misconception about meditation that we need to have an absence of thoughts when we're meditating. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but unless you are an enlightened Buddhist monk, I don't think you're going to be able to do this for longer than about 5 seconds. So I would say that this idea of closing your eyes, connecting with the breath, and if you have a thought come in, have patience and understanding for yourself, interact with the thought, ask yourself how it feels, good or bad, something very simple, and then let it float away. And this mindfulness in the moment is a muscle that we exercise so that when you are feeling hot in the moment, you can take this moment and interact with it and then let it float away. It's a very important skill that I feel like meditation, again, is this thing that people think that they're in a room and they're thinking about nothing, but in reality, it's this skill and this muscle that we need to exercise. So we're going to do a little exercise. And for 3 minutes, we are just going to breathe. And I'm going to take you through something very similar to what I do in a yoga class. If any of you have ever done yoga before, you don't need to stand up or do any kind of up dog, down dog, anything like that. But this is just breathing. Just breathing. And I will keep an eye on the time, but I want you to start by first fixing your gaze at a point somewhere on this wall. You're all facing this way. Just look at something. Maybe this chord up here, maybe the piano here, and start to breathe in a very unmetronomic way. And when you feel good, close your eyes. When you're breathing, feel the lungs expand and come back. If it helps you to focus on the breath, you can count at the top of the inhale. 1, 2, and at the bottom. And then just for a moment, focus your energy to the top of your head, right where the crown would be. And think about drawing a line from the top of your head down your face, past your neck, down your chest, past your hips, down your leg, and land on your feet. And wiggle all 10 toes. And then draw that line back up from your shin, past your knees, past your hips, up past your chest, and place it on your head. And I'm going to count down from 3, and when I get to 0, I want you to feel like you're at the deepest point of this breath. That the breath at 0 is the most relaxed breath you've ever taken. That every number you're stepping deeper, deeper into a relaxed breath. 3. 2. 1. And 0. And open your eyes. So that was 120 seconds. You have a several amount of those groups of time during your day that you can do exactly what we just did. Just out of curiosity, how many people in the room have meditated before in some form. Lots of you. Okay. What was that like for you guys? Just physical sensations? What were you thinking about? Anything? Wes, pick on you.
So you stopped me. I knew you were going to pick. I'm having a lot of tension issues, and I felt like I was able to kind of pinpoint where, like exactly where, like specific muscle spots and stuff during it, but also like just through the breathing relaxed. So that's where I'm at like right now. It was very physical, but the mental was on the physical. Like I was able to concentrate without external stuff. Like I could feel it from the inside almost.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is just breath awareness. And we breathe unconsciously all the time, but if we just groundedness is inherently just being aware of the breath because it's something we do unconsciously so much. Anyone else? Yeah.
Feeling my body, feeling my experience without judgment of it needing to be anything.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, especially when you have someone just saying things to you, like you, also your interpretation of, for example, drawing a string from the top of your head all the way down your body is probably very different than mine. And sometimes I use different kind of words or qualifications to go through that experience, but it's all just corporal awareness. And it's all just anything that you can do to think about your body and what is happening right now. So thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Yeah.
Jared, I feel like I have another side of the coin.
Okay.
Last time I tried doing this, I was outside, and all I felt was frustration because I was trying to focus, and I was hearing traffic, and I was hearing, angry people honking their horns and all this, and I feel like I never really got what I wanted out of it. So do you feel like there's times that also it's sort of like a failure to meditate?
What do you want to get out of meditation?
Relaxation, focus.
Do you feel like there's any kind of effort that is associated with relaxation?
Well, I suppose there has to be, right? I mean, because you have to say that you really want to be relaxed.
I guess so. I mean, I think there's, the things that you were mentioning, traffic and things, I think those are things that can just ground us even further, for example. If I'm driving, that is oftentimes one of the most, this is almost crazy to say because I have days when this is not the case, but that's almost one of the most mindful exercises that we can do. Because, for example, when you hear someone's horn, you can think about that and then just bring yourself back to the road. That's why my dad's a trucker, so I can drive long distances and not get frustrated, and it's a very relaxing experience for me. I know, good for you. Thanks, man. But thinking about how, a highway is structured and there's these signs every couple of miles or every mile, and then just looking at that sign and looking away, I think this idea of going to something and then coming back to the breath instead of thinking, oh, I'm frustrated that I'm not relaxed right now, that might be just a better way to start that. When we're frustrated with not being relaxed, I think that just pushes us further into this idea of not being relaxed. So sort of what you're saying. But yeah, this is sort of goes along also with what I was saying about that meditation in many ways is kind of this social construct that involves us sitting in a room quietly and just trying really hard not to think about anything. A lot of this too, in meditation, I believe firmly to be this muscle that needs to be exercised. And starting with, if 120 seconds was too much and you didn't get anything out of that, start with 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 20 seconds. There's a lot of parallels to this in music. I mean, you don't start by playing a whole Bordoni etude as soon as you start playing the tuba or the euphonium. You maybe start with long tones, or you start with half the etude, and making something more manageable, it might be a better pathway to get to what we want. Does any of that resonate? Yeah, just starting smaller. I mean, also with physical exercise too, like we're not going to start by running a mile. We're going to start by running maybe a tenth of a mile. Otherwise, we'll just die on the side of the road. Good. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, guys. Just going to move through this for the sake of time. Oh, okay. The first idea, and this is sort of step one on the hotline, is this idea of just pressing pause. And that is literally exactly what we just did. So just taking a few seconds to assess whatever is making you tense. I always start this process with 4 sets of 4 inhales and 4 exhales. So you're doing 32 breaths, math. And when you're done that, then you ask yourself the question, what is going on? And oftentimes we can get to the core of what is bothering us. I think, if you can get there even quicker without the breath, but the breath is just a way to physically relax us so that that question is easily answerable. But the idea that just we are so close to actually understanding a little bit more about what is bothering us, that we can just ask ourselves that question, and our gut or mind or heart can tell us that very quickly. If something's bothering me, asking myself this question, it's like, oh yeah, that does suck. And just saying that oftentimes just alleviates a lot of tension or pressure around that particular feeling. This idea of counting backwards by 3s from 100, if any of you have trouble with insomnia, this is brilliant. My conception of it is just that it's complex enough to give ourselves something to think about, but simple enough to sort of lull ourselves into a sense of sleep. And if you count by 2s, it's very systematic, but if you count by 4s, also systematic. By 3s, sort of changes. I mean, I'm not good at math, so it's a little complex for me. And again, this just helps reduce any kind of mental chatter that we have around something that is bothering us. So whatever you can do to get yourself to a point of having a clear head to target this thing that is bothering you is really the way that we want to go with this. Grounding technique. Something that we do also all the time, something that I do all the time, something that is also very relevant with regards to performance anxiety, if any of you struggle with this. So this idea that connecting ourselves with physical things around the room makes us think about what is happening right now. This is really relevant in an audition situation. I do this every time I walk on stage, especially in an audition where the space you're playing in is likely an unfamiliar space. So even, if I was walking out here, I would walk to my chair and then just start to connect myself with things in the room. What color are the chairs? How many chairs are in the front row? How many steps are there? What color is my seat? And just running through these things. I mean, this idea, 5 things, 4 things, we can do this really quickly. Wes, I'm picking on you again. 5 things you can see in the room right now.
Flags, microphones, speakers, chairs, and
4 things you can feel.
the chair under me, the cushion.
Your glasses, your shirt, a couple other things. Kevin, 3 things you can hear. Yes. 2 things you can smell.
I smell Hall, and I smell laundry detergent.
Nice. And 1 thing you can taste.
I can taste my breakfast that I had this morning a little bit.
Very honest. I appreciate that. So this is a silly exercise, but doing it by yourself, especially when you're in a tense moment, is just one of those things that you can do to get yourself more to a point of focus and calm. And again, especially with regards to performance anxiety, just one of those things that really connects us with the room that we're in. So often we walk out on stage and it's just tunnel vision focus, and we're just looking at the music stand and trying not to make eye contact with anyone on stage. But opening yourself up to your surroundings and making eye contact with people will sort of break that barrier down, and I believe to make things a little bit easier. Personal crisis toolkit. This is sort of something that I've constructed myself as part of this presentation, but this idea that there are, sort of as I talked about before, there are self-care things that I do that I know that I can do when I get to a point of requiring self-care, that I believe that it requires less energy to do those things if I know what those things are before I get to that point. So this is an awareness piece. I mean, there are likely things that all of us know that bring ourselves to a point of calm more than other things. And this is great, especially with regards to, if you have a stressful day, the easiest thing sometimes is to turn to a vice, whether it be, you can eat or drink alcohol or do drugs. And these are easy ways to relieve stress because they're oftentimes accessible to us if we have the means to do so. But sometimes going for a walk is, of course, much more difficult than pouring ourselves a drink. And I think those things, just having those things lined up, of course, are healthier ways to target stress and more sustainable ways to target stress as well. The idea also that you can talk yourself down from a particular situation by asking yourself, what is the worst that can happen? Again, something very relevant with regards to performance anxiety. So if any of you have a recital coming up, what is the worst thing if I miss the high B flat in Symphony Fantastique? Somebody notices? I mean, you don't die. So this, of course, works for particular people, but sometimes, somebody might be like, well, I'll fail my jury and I'll lose everything. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. So it really works for particular logic-minded individuals. So teachers out there, of course, just think about when you're using this tool, because sometimes it can make things worse for some people, speaking from experience. This idea also at the end of reframing the voice inside of our head, this is something that is very prevalent in the music world. Of course, oftentimes when we're performing, we have this voice inside of our head that's saying, you're going to miss the high B flat in Symphony Fantastique. And how many times did we miss the high B flat in Symphony Fantastique after that voice has spoken? In this book, The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, great book, he talks about how if we assign a persona to that voice inside of our head, it takes the power away from it. So when this voice is talking to us, it feels like this kind of ubiquitous, all-knowing force that knows everything, but that's simply not true. It's literally just a voice inside of our head. So in this way, I think assigning a persona that is sort of, in jest, for example, I use my roommate. So my roommate's the one who's telling me I'm going to miss the high B flat in Symphony Fantastique. And what does my roommate know? He doesn't even play tuba. So, see, we're all laughing. It's not serious anymore. And then the last point before I take some questions is just this idea that we all have a support system out there. And this idea that there's a lot of people out there that I talk to who often say something along the lines of, well, when somebody talks to me, I don't know what to say, or I'm not good at talking to people, I just don't know how to listen. Again, like many things, listening is a muscle that needs to be exercised. And if we listen to others how we want to be listened to, or we treat others how we want to be treated, that takes a lot of the kind of stress away from listening to somebody. So many times, especially in my younger years, I feel like when somebody was opening up to me about something, I would feel so much responsibility to try to fix their problems, especially if it was a student or if I had gone down that path. And if you were in that situation, would you want someone to tell you how to do something, or would you want someone to just listen to you? And this is really kind of my biggest point, is that I think many of us are not aware of the support system that we have. And you all have friends, family members, colleagues who likely would drop everything to support you if you ever needed anything. And a big part of this, and just being a good support system for others, is the idea of active listening, a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I think very few people actually define. So when we're listening actively, we're listening with the intent of fully understanding and comprehending what someone says when they're speaking to us. So a few points: just don't get distracted, try not to interrupt them, use door openers like "go on, that's interesting," paraphrase. So say, if someone says, "I'm having a tough day," don't say, "sounds like you're having a tough day." That doesn't sound good. Say something more like, "Sounds like you're going through a tough time. Tell me more about that." And has just a little bit more weight and understanding behind it. And then again, taking responsibility out of this idea that sometimes silence is better than saying anything. And if you don't say anything, if someone's opening up to you, oftentimes they will just keep talking about what's bothering them. And it takes a lot of the responsibility away from you to prescribe a solution to them, and allows them the space to open up about things that are bothering them. So that's how you listen to people. And I need to read this sometimes too. By no means am I a perfect listener, but just reminding ourselves that we can be the person that we would need sometimes in a dark period is important. So all that to say, I by no means am an expert about mental health. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. But I have experience with these things, and I've been trained to offer these tools to people in need. And if anyone you know or you are ever in any kind of hardship or difficult time, there are tools at your disposal, and there are resources at your disposal. And if you would like to continue this conversation further, that is my email. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. Any questions? I'll be around for the rest of the day if anyone wants to talk individually as well. Questions? Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.